We are live. Hello, everyone. It is another beautiful Wednesday. For the first time ever in a 5 or 6 year history of doing this weekly show, I think I missed 2 weeks in the last 30 days. Now, the one several weeks ago was not intentional, but this one was. I had the opportunity of going out to the East Coast and having an incredible time with my family and another very close family of ours that we have a lot of fun with. And it was amazing. It was awesome. So I did miss you. I love getting to jump on here and to do these, to get an opportunity to pour into you each week. It is so fun to hear just tons and tons of messages every week. And in fact, it was kind of fun to not do last week and get a lot of messages from people saying, "Hey, where are you? What's going on?" So people I didn't even know watch this. I didn't even know we're consuming this content, and super fun to get an opportunity to have an impact on your week. Hopefully, give you an insight that you hadn't considered before. Hopefully, disrupt a pattern or an assumption that may get us create challenges we didn't realize were there. I mean, that's really what this show is all about. Is life is complicated. Our brain prefers it that way. The more complicated our brain can make our life feel, the more justified it becomes in making sure that we live most of our life conceptually, that we live our life up here, which unfortunately is where we find most people today. Most people today live life in their head and tolerate their actual physical reality. And it's no judgment, no indictment. We can see, when you really understand how the brain works, we can see why that is. We can see, because that's where we want to create the blueprints, is up here. But then when we move beyond the blueprints and we move into vivid visualization of living out those blueprints in our mind, rather than using the blueprints for inspired ideas about how to methodically and consistently take steps to creating it, then coming back into the mind to refine the blueprint and to check in if it's still what we want to be creating, and to be able to observe the thoughts that get in the way when we get bored, or get in the way when we believe our personality just isn't right for this blueprint, or whatever it might be. To be able to observe those things. If the brain can keep life complicated, then we're going to spend a lot more time conceptualizing. But unfortunately, concepts don't change our life. Concepts don't make the difference. It's integration that matters. And that's a completely different game. Integration requires disruption. That's why I do what I do. That's why I'm not as interested in you thinking what I think. I'm not interested in you learning what I know as much as saying things, having conversations, and challenging you in ways that gets you to think differently about the way you think. See, that's one of the tricky parts, is I'm not here to get you to think what I'm thinking. I'm wanting to disrupt unconscious, subconscious patterns that are creating biases that you could never be conscious of, that are creating tweaks and interpretations and perceptions that create major challenges when we realize the simple equation of there's your reality and there's the reality. And every once in a while, those will cross paths, every once in a while. But most of the time, your reality is not the reality. And that's true of every human being on planet Earth. Some of us are able to wield very logical, analytical weapons to get other people to buy into our reality being the reality, even especially ourselves, and sometimes to our detriment. And today we're talking about some of the impacts that can have on our leadership. Leadership is one of the primary focuses at Habit Finder. We spend a lot of time working on leadership, especially in building a volunteer army kind of culture. See, because if you're building a army of W-2s, if you will, okay, you're building on a foundation of compliance. And Gallup gave us some really harsh news a while back in terms of those pieces. And that is that they did a survey and found that almost 80% of W-2 workers, 80% of people that are employed in the United States, the primary reason they have a job is just for benefits, for health benefits. It's not passion, it's not drive, it's not commitment, it's health benefits. And the fear of losing those health benefits drives compliance. Well, we step in and work on leadership of a volunteer army nature, because a volunteer army has got to be driven by commitment, not by compliance. And that can be really challenging, because you can dress up leadership style with commitment and entrepreneurial type ideals, but if at its core it's still been trained to rely on compliance, we're going to create some challenges. Now, when it comes to leadership, I want to share a couple of really fundamental things about being a great leader. And this is going to be a disruption conversation, okay? This is not going to be a versus battle. This is going to be understanding that the current hierarchy of over 90% of people, when they look at what makes good leaders, or at least what they end up adhering to when the rubber is meeting the road, when they're out on the battlefield of leadership itself, over 90% of people have a hierarchy that is making life way harder than it needs to be, that is robbing them of sustainability and consistency and rejuvenation for themselves and the people that they're leading. And a lot of that comes down to short-term vision, which is what our brains are wired for. We're still very animal in terms of short-term vision. Og Mandino talked about in The Greatest Salesman in the World, when the eagle is thirsty, it drinks. When the lion is hungry, it eats. There's still a lot of that drives us, but we know we've been given gifts beyond that. Gifts of metacognition, the ability to step back and think about and ponder our own lives. No other creature on earth can do that. But that creates some counterintuitive, some tug of war inside of our own mind, because we've got the carnal animal mind that's very impulsive, very irrational. And that's the part of the mind we're less aware of. It's tied into our nervous system, not so much our thinker brain. And then we've got our thinker brain that allows us to elevate above all that. And a lot of times we end up surrendering to the downstairs brain and using the thinker brain to, what they call in psychology, to confabulate it, to essentially to explain our irrational behavior. But that would make it rational. Well, that's to help us sleep better at night. So we're going to have a conversation about being a stupid leader, because I believe that it's one of the greatest things you can do is be a stupid leader. We've all heard it. Make sure you're not the smartest person in the room. Now, I'm not talking about be a stupid leader in terms of being intentionally ignorant, belligerent, okay, or dangerous. I'll tell you what I mean about being a stupid leader. And here's the first piece. The first key to being a stupid leader is understanding what the most important thing you can do in leadership is. The most important skill set you can have as a leader. I get that love and trust and respect are elements of the culture of your leadership, but the actual application of your leadership, the number one thing is not what you know. It's not what you know. And yet, in observing tens of thousands of leaders over my career and working with many of them, when the rubber meets the road, when we're out on the battlefield of leadership, that tends to be the reliance. Do I have the answers? Am I competent in the technical, the tactical? If one of my team members needs something from me, can I provide it? Well, if we're at war, that might be a slightly different conversation, which is very much how our brains operated thousands of years ago, when it was lion, run away, or lion, attack it, or whatever. But now we're in a very different world. A lot of us are in a very different world that when we rely on the carnal and animal and impulsive, it makes life way more exhausting than it needs to be. So what your number one skill set is not, is what you know. What it is what you notice. That's number one. Great leadership is not about what you know. That doesn't mean you should be intentionally ignorant. You should learn. But as soon as we start to hang our hat, okay, as soon as we start to hang our hat on our knowledge, then we are at risk of being a hero, not a leader. We're at risk of being a savior, not a leader. We're at risk of being the person who has all the answers, which means we're never going to be able to make room for people to find their own answers. That's what great leaders do. Great leaders are not focused on what they know. They work on what they know. That's an important part. But they're not focused myopically on what they know. Their badge is on what they notice. What do they notice? They notice what's important to other people. That is a lost art in terms of getting an opportunity to really trust that, to notice what's important to other people, especially when it's not important to you. We have brains that are wired to pay attention to things that we naturally pay attention to. Meaning, I'm going to notice things about you that are already important to me. I may notice what I don't like about you because that's important to me, that's not a part of my life, okay? I'm going to notice what I do like about you because I notice that that's important to me about my life. But that gives you such a limited scope in the range of humanity to simply connect and lead and feel like you're a good fit for people that are exactly like you. That's not leadership. Leadership is not about finding personality clones. It's not about just the people you naturally jive with. If that was the case, then anyone and everyone could just be like, I can be a great leader. No, leadership is a commitment to not making it about you. And yet, oftentimes, most leaders build teams all about themselves. If they can find someone that's a lot like them, they're going to pour into them. It's not going to feel like work. It's going to be great. But as soon as it comes time to pour into someone that's not naturally like them, that's where we run into the problem of relying on what we know, because it's easy to share what we know with people that are just like us. It's difficult to share what we know with people who aren't, because they don't care what we know. They care that we care. And the greatest way, first step to showing that you care is to notice. Notice what's important to people. That's number one. Okay, spend less time, not no time. I want to be careful that we're not having some systemic all or nothing conversation. It's not spend no time on knowledge, but spend less time on knowledge and more time being able to make it about other people so you can notice what's important to them, which requires you to set aside your own bias, set aside your own reality. It may even require you at times to not step in and save somebody, which is a lot harder for leaders than they're ever willing to admit or may even be aware of. So let us, from here on out, make a commitment every day to say, what am I doing today to work on the skill of noticing? Because it's not hard to take care of the knowledge piece. In most successful companies today, finding what you need to know is not hard. But if we get tanked out just because we feel like we were supposed to already have the answer, we're supposed to be able to tell them, rather than give them space to trip up a little bit themselves, giving them space to learn some of the tough lessons themselves at an appropriate level, and teach them where to find the answers, teach them how to find the answers, then we're going to achieve the ultimate goal of any leader. The ultimate goal of any leader, I believe, should be to create self-directed people. Meaning, if you're a great leader, they're not going to need you to lead them in everything forever. They are going to become leaders. And even better, they're going to become leaders that will create other self-directed people. And then they'll become great leaders. That's the ripple effect we want to create with our leadership. That's what we want to do. And yet we're all too willing to bail and quit prematurely to rely on something as cold and coarse and easily accessible as knowledge. That's a cheap substitute for intrinsic leadership, of noticing. That's harder to trust because that's a longer term game. If I know something and I can tell you what I know and I can fix your problem, I can get an immediate solution, but how sustainable is that? How often am I feeling like I'm coming back to change another flat tire and another flat tire and another flat tire and another flat tire in my business or in my team or whatever it might be? You know, we just continue to do that. We just continue to do the same things over and over again. Insanity, right? Well, let's make a commitment to focus on noticing versus knowing. Number 2, to be a stupid leader is to allow yourself to be more fluid. Okay? When we're too smart, when we're too analytical, when we're too focused on what we know and needing to know all the right things for our team and solving all their problems, there's no energy left to be fluid. And life is epically fluid. It is constantly changing. And therein lies a major challenge with our brain again. This brain of ours that has marching orders to keep us safe, which means it wants to keep us predictable, which means if it can convince you that your life, your methods, your ideas, your perspectives are permanent, it feels good. But trying to imagine that what you believe, what you see, what you think you understand, what you know about someone, what you think you know about someone is permanent, is what creates destruction. Okay? A friend of mine shared with me an incredible quote this morning from a book she's reading called The Places That Scare You by Pema Chodron. And I asked her to send me this quote because it's so on point for what I wanted to talk about this morning. It says, "We expect that what is always changing should be graspable and predictable." We do. Whether we realize it or not, this is the way the brain is trained. This is the way the neurology is wired. We expect that what is always changing should be graspable and predictable. We are born with a craving for resolution and security that governs our thoughts, words, and actions. We are like people in a boat that is falling apart, trying to hold on to the water. The dynamic, energetic, and natural flow of the universe is not acceptable to the conventional mind. The dynamic, energetic, and natural flow of the universe is not acceptable to the conventional mind. Our prejudices and addictions are patterns that arise from the fear of a fluid world. Our prejudices and addictions are patterns that arise from the fear of a fluid world because we mistakenly take what is always changing to be permanent, and we suffer. Whew. Powerful. The more we think we've got things figured out, the more we lean on our knowledge and our intellect and our perception and our reality. The more rigid we become without even realizing it. We get ourselves on a train track of leadership. One of the greatest mentors, one of my greatest mentors, who I've never actually met, it was something he said in a training that I invested in. Wyatt Woodsmall said, "You could be wrong and you probably are." Which some people might consider that's, if you're wrong, you're stupid. You may not think that out loud, but how many times have you been wrong and said to yourself, "Oh, you're so stupid"? It's there, okay? And that's the stupid leadership I'm asking you to embrace. Not to be intentionally stupid, but to wake up every morning with a little bit of an edge of, well, I could be stupid and I probably am. And that's actually a good thing for this very fluid world, because as soon as I think I've got it figured out, it changes. And the more I was convinced I had it figured out, the more painful it is to change. The more I am relying on my intellect, on my analytics, on my systems, the more painful it is when life changes. Now, that doesn't mean we abandon the systems. That doesn't mean we abandon the insights. That doesn't mean we abandon the analytics and the logic. It just means we make sure we're never holding on so tight that when it gets taken away, it doesn't dislocate our shoulder. Because that's what we do. We hang on to it so tight. This is the truth. This is what's going on. This is how it has to be. This is duplicatable. And then suddenly, the world changes and it gets pulled off the scene. And the harder we were hanging on to it, the more painful it is to get yanked out of our reality. See, that's the challenge. I've shared this many times. Jordan Peterson said the difficult thing about learning new truth is that old truth has to die. And when that gets yanked out, the harder you are hanging on to it. Okay? I love that, Fran. Thank you. I absolutely love that. Intellectually stupid. It's perfect. Perfect. Be intellectually stupid. Be smart about how stupid you are, okay? Or be smart about how stupid you want to be, so that you can be fluid, so that we can realize how much of our suffering, and what it said there in the quote, powerful, that our addictions, our prejudices are based in permanence, in an impermanent world, in a fluid, ever-changing, ever-evolving world. Wow. When we need structure, we don't want to be totally... like that's not good either. But man, there's a big difference. There's a big margin between totally rigid and fluid and having no structure and just being a puddle of goop. We're not saying the puddle of goop. We're just saying stop trying to be rigid, because that's what your brain wants, because that's what makes it feel safe. That's what makes it feel okay. All the more reason to be committed to be a stupid leader. And last thing is, commonly, culturally, okay, people that are stupid have been referred to as slow. Oh, they're slow. Good. That's a great thing to be as a leader. Be slow. Be thoughtful. Be intentional. All of which are impossible to be if you are in a hurry. So please, don't be afraid of being slow. They're kind of slow. Good. You'll be here a lot longer than they are. You'll enjoy the journey a lot more than they will. It might take you a little bit longer to get there in certain places. You don't get to use being slow as an excuse to not be efficient. You don't get to use slow as an excuse to procrastinate. But we don't want to be in a hurry. Lao Tzu said, nature is never in a hurry, and yet all is accomplished. Wow. Pretty cool lesson. But as the other things on here are true as well, it's tough to trust. It's tough to trust that if I focus more on what I notice rather than what I know, if I focus more on being fluid and disrupted than on being permanent and predictable, and if I focus more on being slow than hurried, it's tough to trust that. In this moment right now, you're sitting in your car, you're sitting at your computer, at your desk, whatever it might be. Right now, it's not hard to grab onto this. This makes so much sense. You know, like Beth said, I needed this today. It's awesome. Cool. Make it matter. Go and challenge yourself to integrate it. You're not going to knock it out of the park every day. You've got a brain that never sleeps, makes you act in ways you do not comprehend, as Og said, and chillingly wrote, that has marked out a path that threatens to imprison your future. So you don't need to go and eradicate knowledge. You don't need to go and eradicate permanence and systems and duplicatability. You don't need to go eradicate speed. All of those things can play important parts, but they're not more important than what you notice, how fluid you are, and how slow and intentional you can go. Those who can go intentionally slow will go faster than anyone else when it's all said and done. But you may see you're slow today, or even you're slow this week, or even you're slow this month, and see someone else who it's the tortoise and the hare all over again, right? Oh my gosh, they're so much faster. Well, the tortoise didn't figure out how to run faster than he had to. Just one foot in front of the other. And if those are, well, that's just not the way I'm built. Well, okay, cool. That's not the way you've learned to compensate for things. It's not easy to focus on what you notice versus what you know. Knowing may be a cheap substitute for noticing, but it gives us immediate gratification. Oh, I had the answer. Noticing requires more patience, more compassion, more curiosity. Being fluid requires more compassion, more patience, more curiosity. Going slowly requires more compassion, more patience, more curiosity. What I believe to be the three greatest superpowers any human being can have, the requirements to be able to become better, to be able to become the best version of you. You can't do it without those things. Now, as a fair warning, there are people who use slow as an excuse. So beware of that. There's always a shadow side to every good instruction, every good disruption. So, and also, we don't want to use noticing as an excuse to not learn. We don't want to use fluid as an excuse to not find systems and duplicatability that works. Again, this is not about letting go. This is about loosening our grip so we can still hang on to it, but we're not so fixed on it that we can't evolve, we can't grow, and we're not going to eliminate the idea of speed and sometimes seasons of hustle because we just need to go slow. You don't get to use any of these as an excuse for inaction. You don't get to use any of these as an excuse for procrastination. You don't get to use any of these as an excuse for, well, I don't want to sell this person. I just want to notice what's important to them. Guess what that is? That's the first step to selling, is to notice what's important to them. So be careful to not just grab some kumbaya, I don't have to really be intentional, I just need to feel good about myself kind of approach to life. Because that's just as dangerous as the in the hurry, racking yourself over the coals and driving too hard. Those are the two extremes. We want to find calibration in between those. So we've got to know where to look. And so what I've shared is the most common for most people that would be listening today. Relying too much on your knowledge, relying too much on your brain convincing you that this is permanent. You finally got some things figured out. I mean, how many times have you said that, right? Oh, just when I thought I figured it out, life told me otherwise. Well, the pain isn't in life telling you otherwise. It was in how firm your grip was on what you were convinced you had figured out. And the other thing that serves all of those things is slow down. But your slow is going to be different than someone else's slow. You'll know you're going slow enough because you can hear yourself. If you're going too fast to have conversations with yourself, you're going too fast. In fact, I remember training for long distance races in running. They would say, if you can't have a conversation, you're jogging too fast. You're going too hard for sustainability. That's interesting. I like that parallel. Just realizing that right now. Thank you so much for being on today, as we've made a case for being a stupid leader, being an intellectually stupid leader. Thank you, Fran. And focusing more on noticing, not totally on noticing and not on knowledge, but more on noticing and not on knowing, more on fluidity and disruption rather than on permanence and predictability, and more on slow intentionality rather than hurried intensity. These are critical pieces to being a great leader. And we all know great leadership starts with personal leadership, and then getting the opportunity to lead others to become even better about our own personal leadership. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you being here. Loving the comments. That's so great. Especially the last one. It's my goal to be stupid. Yes. Rock it. Okay. Love you, Don. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And we'll see you next time. Take care.